Some critics have taken aim at the Apostle Paul for being a bit of a know-it-all. Specifically in chapter 27, as he stands up and attempts to give guidance and instruction to the sailors on his journey to Rome. Verse 9 and 10, Luke tells us much time had been lost and sailing had already become dangerous because now it was after the Day of Atonement. So Paul warned them, men, I can see that our voyage is going to be disastrous and bring great loss to ship and cargo and to our own lives also. Who does he think he is? An apostle filled by the Spirit, maybe one of the most brilliant minds for Scripture that's ever lived, but that doesn't make you a sailor. Some so-called critical scholars, rather than taking aim at Paul, will direct their ire at Luke, contending that here he's presenting Paul as some kind of Superman. Not only is he an expert in the word, he also knows his way around the ship. Now, statements like that reveal much about their biases and belie a rather low understanding paraded as wisdom. Now, hear me out. If you calculate the mileage from Paul's various missionary journeys spanning 3 centuries, I mean, he had traveled over 3,000 miles by sea. Now, not to mention seeing things go totally wrong more than a few times. And Paul was no noob on the water. His suggestion just so happens to be born of experience. Well, he seems to be speaking of from wisdom and experience in verse 9 and 10. His encouragement beginning with verse 22, it doesn't come from wisdom. It came from the Lord. As all hope seems lost, Paul spoke up, saying, but now I urge you to keep up your courage, because not one of you will be lost, only the ship will be destroyed. And last night, an angel of the God to whom I belong and whom I serve stood beside me. He said, do not be afraid, Paul. You must stand trial before Caesar. And God has graciously given you the lives of all who sail with you. So keep up your courage, men. For I have faith in God that will happen just as he told me. And because Paul suggests that this happens at night, it's easy to confuse this with a dream or a vision. But Paul doesn't say that. He says, the angel stood beside me. In God's abundant grace, he sent a messenger to stand with Paul on the swaying boat right beside him. And the word of the Lord is given, do not be afraid. Now here's what strikes me from this. In chapter 23, while in Fort Antonia, we're told, this verse 11, the following night the Lord stood near Paul and said, take courage. As you have testified about me in Jerusalem, you must also testify in Rome. Why did Paul need a second visitation on the ship? And clearly, the action and message of the angel seems to be a reminder of the Lord's appearance. Sure, Paul had sat in prison for a little over 2 years in Caesarea, but the Lord showed up and said, you must testify in Rome. Now, did Paul's faith waver? Obviously, I don't think his faith in the saving power of the cross wavered. But the angel said, fear not, you must stand trial before Caesar. I wonder if that implies that as the wave tossed them, that Paul feared, that he needed some reassurance, not in Jesus' love and his provision, but in God's purpose. I think it reminds us that Paul was human, just like you and I. And as such, there were times that he needed some assurance. I don't know about you, but I don't have a lot of experiences with angel visitation. Not that God can't or doesn't still show up in our lives in that way, but for us, the place we go for our assurance is the Word. When we are storm-tossed and afraid, wondering where God is, what he's up to, we're not left without resource. We're given the promise of his word. And regardless of the circumstances of this life or the days that have passed, he is faithful to do what he said he will do. I pray that we would lean into his word in these trying times, and that he would strengthen and sustain us and give us the courage to do all that we must. Have a blessed week.